I remember the exact second my dream broke, and the scary part is, it didn't shatter loudly, it cracked quietly, right there under the bright lights while millions of people were watching me, waiting for me to be strong, waiting for me to smile, waiting for me to explain how it felt to come so close and still walk away with nothing. And as I sat in that chair during the press conference, my hands folded, my voice steady, but my chest heavy, I realized something nobody prepares you for. Nobody tells you that when the world starts calling you generational, you don't, get to be a kid anymore. You don't get to hide from the moment. You have to carry it. And all I could think about was the little girl I used to be, the one in Iowa who stayed in the gym long after everyone else left, pretending the empty seats were full, pretending the countdown was real, pretending that someday this would all mean something. And back then it was simple. It was just me and the ball and a dream that felt too big for where I came from. But now the dream wasn't mine alone anymore. It belonged to everyone watching, everyone judging, everyone waiting to see if I was really who they believed I was. And that's when I understood the truth. The game hadn't just changed my life, it had turned me into something else. Something bigger than a player, something people invested in, argued about, doubted, defended, and built around. And the craziest part is, before I ever played a single minute as a pro, before I ever signed my first contract, before I ever stepped onto the biggest stages, I had already stepped into a different kind of arena, one where every move I made didn't just affect the scoreboard, it affected the future of the sport itself. And I didn't see it happening while I was living it. I was just that same competitive kid, still chasing moments, still chasing that feeling of hitting a shot when everything is on the line. But somewhere along the way, without asking for it, without planning it, I became the moment everyone else was watching. The first time a brand called me, I honestly thought it was a mistake, because in my mind, I was still just Caitlin from Iowa, still the same girl who stayed late in empty gyms, pretending the countdown clock was real, pretending the crowd was real, pretending the moment mattered, and suddenly people were telling me those imaginary moments had become real business, real value, real opportunity. And that's when I realized something most athletes never get taught. That performance doesn't just live on the court, it lives in how people feel when they watch you. And one of the first times I truly understood that was when State Farm didn't just ask me to post something or hold a product. They built an entire national campaign around me. And I remember standing there on set thinking, how is this happening before I've even played a single WNBA game? How is this happening before I've proven anything at the professional level? And the answer wasn't stats, it wasn't trophies, it was connection. Because when that commercial aired, kids didn't see an actress. They saw a player who felt real. They repeated the lines, they recreated the scenes, they made edits, and suddenly I wasn't just part of a game, I was part of culture. And that's when everything accelerated, because brands weren't just investing in what I had done, they were investing in what I represented. The story of a girl who didn't wait for permission to dream big. And I remember people telling me, don't mess this up, don't say the wrong thing, don't lose yourself. And that scared me more than any defender ever could. Because on the court, I know who I am, I know how to respond. But off the court, everything felt new. Everything felt bigger. And I realized the only way to survive it was to stay the same person I'd always been, to stop trying to be perfect and just be authentic, because authenticity is the only thing people can't fake. And when that State Farm commercial turned into a viral moment, when kids started quoting it back to me, when I saw fans smiling because of something I was part of, that's when it hit me. This was bigger than basketball now. This was influence, and influence comes with responsibility, because every move you make teaches people something. Every moment becomes part of someone else's belief system. And whether I was ready or not, I had become proof that women's basketball wasn't just growing, it was arriving. And I was standing right in the middle of that moment. I started realizing the shift wasn't just happening on the court. It was happening everywhere else, in rooms I wasn't even in conversations I wasn't part of, in decisions being made by people who had never touched basketball, but suddenly cared about where I stood and what I represented. And it felt strange, because I was still the same person who used to wake up early and shoot alone before school, and still the same person who missed things most teenagers never wanted to miss, still the same person who chose the gym over everything else. But now those sacrifices were turning into something else, something visible, something brands and companies and executives wanted to be part of. And I remember the first time I walked onto a commercial set, it didn't feel real. There were cameras everywhere, lights brighter than any arena I had played in, people adjusting every detail, waiting for me to say lines someone else had written, and I kept thinking, how did I get here? How did a girl who just loved to play basketball become someone companies trusted to represent them? And the truth is, I didn't change who I was when the cameras turned on. I didn't try to act different or become someone else. I just showed up the same way I always had. Focused, competitive, present, and somehow that was enough. And that's when I started understanding something bigger than basketball. People weren't connecting to me because I was perfect. They were connecting because I was real, because they could see the work, the belief, the journey that hadn't skipped any steps. And when those commercials started airing, when kids started repeating lines I didn't even realize would matter, when fans started seeing me not just as a player, but as something they could relate to, something they could believe in, I realized the game had given me a platform. And with that platform came influence. And with influence came responsibility. And suddenly every shot I took, every interview I gave, every decision I made carried weight far beyond the final score. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just playing basketball anymore. I was helping shape what came next. What surprised me the most wasn't the size of the deals or the names behind them. It was what they represented. Because every partnership, every campaign, every time a brand chose to work with me, it felt like they weren't just investing in one player. They were investing in what women's basketball could become. And I remember standing there holding my first signature ball, running my fingers across the material, realizing this wasn't something given to me. It was something built through every early morning, every missed event, every doubt I had to push through alone. And people see the finished product. They see the commercials, the headlines, the numbers, but they don't see the quiet moments when you question whether it's all worth it, when you're exhausted and nobody is watching, when the only thing pushing you forward is the belief that someday it will matter. And now I was watching it matter in real time, watching arenas fill up, watching little girls wear my jersey, watching brands create products inspired by how I trained, how I played, how I lived. And that's when I understood this was never just about selling anything. It was about showing what was possible, about proving that the story of a girl who believed in herself could reach far beyond the court. And every time I stepped into those spaces, whether it was a photo shoot or a meeting or a commercial, I carried that same mindset with me, and the same mindset I carried into every game. Because I knew none of it existed without the game itself, without the ball in my hands, without the work that started when nobody cared and continued when everybody did. And the craziest part was realizing this was still just the beginning, that everything happening now was only opening doors that had never been opened before. Not just for me, but for everyone watching and wondering if they could be next. But with every new opportunity, every new headline, every new partnership, I also started to feel something else, something heavier, because I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about what I represented. And everywhere I went, I could see it in people's eyes, the expectations, the hope, the belief that I was carrying something bigger than myself. And that realization changes you. It makes you more aware of every move you make, every word you say, every performance you deliver, because you understand that kids are watching, players are watching, brands are watching, the entire sport is watching. And there were moments when I asked myself if I was ready for that, if I deserved that kind of influence. But then I would go back to the court, back to the only place that ever made complete sense to me, and I'd remember why all of this started in the first place. It started with love, love for the game, love for the process, love for the feeling of creating something out of nothing with a ball in my hands. And that love never changed, even as everything around me did. And that's why when I walked into arenas and heard the noise, saw the cameras, felt the energy, I never saw it as pressure. I saw it as proof that what I believed in as a little girl was real, proof that women's basketball was finally being seen the way it deserved to be seen, and proof that authenticity mattered more than anything else. Because people weren't connecting to me because I was perfect. They were connecting because I was real, because they saw the work, the emotion, the journey. And that connection is something no contract can create and no amount of money can buy. It has to be earned. And I earned it one moment at a time, one shot at a time, one decision at a time. And I knew the responsibility that came with that wasn't something to run from. It was something to embrace. And that's when I finally understood the truth that nobody tells you when you start this journey. The truth that all of this was never really about endorsements or commercials or headlines or even basketball itself. It was about impact. It was about what happens after someone watches you and decides to believe in themselves a little more than they did before. Because I've seen it. I've seen a little girl waiting after games, holding a ball tighter than anything else in her life. I've seen the parents with tears in their eyes telling me their daughter started dreaming again because of what they watched. I've seen arenas fill with people who never cared about women's basketball before, but suddenly couldn't look away. And those moments, those quiet human moments, they mean more than any contract ever could, because they remind me that influence isn't measured by money, it's measured by change. And I know there are still people who doubt me, people who question whether this will last, people who are waiting for the moment it all slows down, but they don't understand something that I've known for a long time. This was never built on hype. It was built on foundation, on thousands of unseen hours, on sacrifice nobody applauded, on belief nobody could validate except me. And that's why I'm not chasing the next deal. I'm not chasing the next headline. I'm chasing the next level of who I can become, because I'm still that girl from Iowa. Still the kid who stayed in the gym longer than everyone else. Still the player who dreams about the next shot before it happens. But now I also understand something else. I understand that every time I step on the court, every time I show up, every time I choose to stay true to who I am, I'm not just playing for myself anymore. I'm building something that will exist long after my last game ends. And this is everything you're seeing right now. This isn't the peak. It isn't the finish line. It isn't the full story. This is just the part where the world finally started paying attention. What nobody prepares you for isn't the noise in the arena, it's the silence when you're finally alone. After the commercials stop filming, after the cameras turn off, after the crowd goes home. It's just me, my thoughts, and the weight of everything that's changed. I remember sitting in my apartment one night staring at my phone, watching the numbers climb, millions of followers, millions of views, millions of opinions, people who loved me, people who hated me, people who had never met me but somehow believed they knew everything about me. And for a moment, it didn't feel real, because in my head, I was still that same girl from Iowa who stayed late in the gym, chasing a dream nobody could see yet. But now, that dream had a spotlight, and that spotlight never turns off. Everywhere I go, people are watching. Every shot I take, every word I say, every expression on my face gets analyzed. And I had to learn fast that when you become visible, you also become a target. There were days I read things about myself that hurt people, saying I didn't deserve it, saying I was overrated, saying I was just hype. And I won't lie, there were moments that got to me, moments I questioned everything, moments I wondered if I was strong enough for this life I asked for. But then I'd think about that little girl again, the one who didn't care about fame, the one who didn't care about deals or attention, the one who just loved the game. And I realized something important. None of this exists without her. None of this matters if I lose her. So I stopped trying to prove people wrong, and I started focusing on proving myself right. I went back to the gym, back to the basics, back to the work. Because the truth is, fame doesn't make you better. Attention doesn't make you stronger. Work does, sacrifice does, belief does. And every early morning, every late night, every drop of sweat reminded me why I started. It was never about being famous. It was about being great. And greatness isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn every single day. I also started to understand that this platform wasn't just pressure, it was responsibility. Kids were watching me the same way I watched my heroes. They were copying my shots, wearing my jersey, believing in themselves because they saw me believe in myself. And that changed everything. Because now it wasn't just my dream anymore. It was bigger than me. I wasn't just playing for wins. I was playing for impact. I was playing for every kid who needed proof that their dreams were possible too. And that's when I stopped seeing the pressure as something heavy. I started seeing it as something powerful. Because pressure means people care. Pressure means what you're doing matters. And I'd rather carry that weight than live without purpose. So even on the hardest days, even when it feels overwhelming, I remind myself of one simple truth. I asked for this, I worked for this, and I'm all not done yet. And the truth is, everything you've seen so far, every commercial, every record, every sold-out arena, that's only the surface of what's really happening. Because what's changing isn't just my life. It's the way people see women's basketball. I've walked into arenas where people told me women's games never sold out before, and now there isn't a single empty seat. I've seen kids waiting for hours just to get a glimpse, not because of a brand, not because of an ad, but because they believe in something. They believe in what this game can be, and that's the part nobody can measure with numbers. That's the part no contract can define. I remember one moment after a game, a little girl came up to me holding a basketball that was almost bigger than she was. She didn't ask for an autograph first. She just looked at me and said, "You make me feel like I can do this too." And in that moment, everything slowed down because that's bigger than any endorsement. That's bigger than any paycheck. That's legacy. And legacy isn't built in commercials. It's built in moments like that. It's built in the invisible impact you leave behind. People see the deals and think that's the reward, but they don't see the cost. They don't see the sacrifices, the missed moments, the pressure to always be strong even when you feel human. They don't see the nights you sit there wondering if you can live up to everything people expect from you. But that's part of it. That's the price of being first. That's the price of changing something. And I've accepted that price because I know why I'm here. I'm here because I love this game. I'm here because I believe in what it can become. And I'm here because I know this isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. There are still people who doubt, still people who question, still people waiting for the moment I fail. And maybe that moment will come someday. Because nobody wins forever, nobody stays on top forever. But when that day comes, it won't erase what's already been done. It won't erase the doors that have been open. It won't erase the kids who started dreaming because they saw someone who looked like them do something they were told was impossible. And that's why I keep going, not for the headlines, not for the brands, not for the money, but for the impact. Because one day the commercials will stop, the crowds will quiet, and the game will move on. But the change, the belief, the inspiration that stays, and when people look back at this moment, I don't want them to just remember the shots I made. I want them to remember what those shots meant. I want them to remember that this was the moment everything started to feel different. And trust me, the story isn't finished. It's just getting started.